Hello everyone. In today's class, we will study about the first chapter in the second POC. It is called the reproduction in organisms. If you'll just look back in the first POC, my first POC biology first chapter, the living word anta ittu. In the living word, you have studied a concept called a characteristic features of living things. So in the characteristic features of living things, there are 5 features here. Number 1, we have growth, metabolism, response to stimuli, reproduction, and adaptation. Among these 5 features, the reproduction is one of the most important features for all the living things on the earth. So in today's class, we'll study about what is the reproduction first and its importance. ಈ reproduction ಬಂದಾಗ okay, we should know the meaning of the term the reproduction. See, reproduction means it is a process by which a living organisms give birth for another organisms. ಇನ್ನು ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ the process of producing a new living organism from another living organism is called reproduction. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ humans, they give birth for the babies. Cow, it gives birth for the calf. Cat, it gives birth for the kitten. Dog, it gives birth for the puppies. See, from this example, if we generalize, we can say reproduction means it is a process by which the new living organisms are produced. So what's the importance of the reproduction on the earth? So reproduction ಏನು ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ? So reproduction, it ensures the continuity of life on the earth. ಅಥವಾ ಇನ್ನೂ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ it ensures the continuity of species on the earth. Suppose if I ask you a question like what if the reproduction was absent on the earth? Reproduction ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದಿದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು? Reproduction ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದಿದ್ರೆ there could have been no life on the earth. So reproduction, it ensures the continuity of life on the earth. ಎರಡನೇದು, as per your syllabus, you should know what is a lifespan. From the point of the theory exam, they're going to ask for 1 mark. ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. See, whenever a living organism, they are born, birth ಆದಮೇಲೆ they live up to certain period of time and they die. So the time gap found between the birth and the natural death, ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೇನೆ, the time gap found between the birth and natural death is called lifespan. And the lifespan is not constant in all the living organisms. It always varies. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ elephant, it lives only for 60 to 90 years. Dog, it lives for 20 to 30 years. Crow, 15 years. Cow, 20 to 25 years. Banyan tree, 200 years. Crocodile, 60 years. Fruit fly, 4 to 5 years. And horse, 60 to 65 years. So this slide I have just given only few examples here. Okay, if you want some more example, you can just search in the internet or you can ask your teachers. Okay, the next is regarding the types of reproduction here. Types ಬಂದಾಗ types ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಟ್ಟು 2 ಥರ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. In types we have usually 2 types of reproduction, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction ಅಂತ. asexual reproduction ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು, sexual reproduction ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು? asexual reproduction ಅಂದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ there is absence of the gamete and involvement of the gamete ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ sexual reproduction ಬಂದಾಗ there is formation of gamete and there is involvement of the gamete here. See, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಟ್ಟು 2 ಥರ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, asexual reproduction ಮತ್ತೊಂದು sexual reproduction. These 2 types of the reproduction can be clearly understood by comparative way. ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಹೋದಾಗ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಕ್ಲಿಯರಾಗಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ, ಎ ಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಇನ್ ದ ಎ ಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ರೀಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ದ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಪ್ರಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ಡ್ ವಿತೌಟ್ ದ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ಸ್. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲಿ. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು? ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ ಅಂದರೆ ದೀಸ್ ಆರ್ ದ ಸೆಕ್ಸ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್. ಪ್ಲ್ಯಾಂಟಲ್ಲಿ ವಿ ಯೂಸ್ ದ ಟರ್ಮ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ದ ಮೇಲ್ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದ ಫೀಮೇಲ್ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್, ಅಥವಾ ದ ಮೇಲ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಮತ್ತು ಫೀಮೇಲ್ ಸೆಲ್. ಅನಿಮಲ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ವಿ ಯೂಸ್ ದಿ ಟರ್ಮ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಸ್ಪರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಎಗ್ ಅಥವಾ ಓವಮ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ದೀಸ್ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ಸ್ in general they're completely absent in the asexual reproduction. So the offsprings are produced without the involvement of the gametes in the asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction bandaga the offsprings are produced with the involvement of the gametes. Okay, the first one. ಎರಡನೇದು ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್. ಹೆಂಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್? ಇದು ಎಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ಸು ಹೆಂಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಎಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ಈಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಸಿಂಪಲ್, ತುಂಬ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಮತ್ತು ಬೇಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಎಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ರೀಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಈಸ್ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ರ್ಯಾಪಿಡ್, ಬೇಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅದು. ಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ರೀಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ರ್ಯಾಪಿಡ್. ಅಂದರೆ ದ ಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ರೀಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಈಸ್ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲೆಕ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಸ್ಲೋ. ಓಕೆ, ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್ ಬರೋಣ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಗ್ಯಾಮೆಟ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲಿ. ಓಕೆ, ದ ಪೇರೆಂಟ್ ದೇ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಗಿವ್ ರೈಸ್ ಟು ದ ಲಿವಿಂಗ್ ಆರ್ಗನಿಸಮ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದೀಸ್ ಲಿವಿಂಗ್ ಆರ್ಗನಿಸಮ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ಡ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದ ಪೇರೆಂಟ್ ಬಾಡಿ ಥ್ರೂ ಮೈಟೋಟಿಕ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್. ಓಕೆ, ಇವಾಗ ಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ರೀಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲೇನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ parents are going to produce the gametes and the gametes are produced through meiotic cell divisions. After this, when the gamete they fuse, ಎರಡು gamete fuse ಆದಾಗ they produce a zygote. This zygote undergoes development through cell division by producing a new organisms. So ತುಂಬ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ, in the asexual reproduction there is involvement of the mitotic cell division, whereas in the sexual reproduction there is no involvement of the meiotic cell division during gamete formation and mitotic cell division during development of the embryo. Okay, fine. The next very important one, see asexual reproduction bandaga offspring produced, okay, they resemble morphologically and genetically with respect to the parents. Such offsprings are referred as the clones ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ. ಓಕೆ, ಬಟ್ ಇನ್ ದಿ ಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ರೀಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಬಂದಾಗ offspring produced they do not resemble the parent either morphologically and genetically. Okay, apart from this, in the asexual reproduction the offspring produced will have a very low adaptability to the changed environment. ಅಂದರೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ, offspring produced through asexual reproduction they will have a less adaptation to the surrounding environment. ಅಡಾಪ್ಟೇಷನ್ ತುಂಬ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಏನು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ದ ಆಫ್ಸ್ಪ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಇನ್ ದ ಎಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ರೀಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಜೆನೆಟಿಕ್ ಮಿಕ್ಸಿಂಗ್ ಅಪ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಜೆನೆಟಿಕ್ ಮಿಕ್ಸಿಂಗ್ ಅಪ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ there is no evolution of the offspring here. So they show less adaptation. But in the sexual reproduction, they have high adaptation to the changing environment. ಅಂದರೆ ಆಫ್ಸ್ಪ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಥ್ರೂ ಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ರೀಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ದೇ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಅಡ್ಯಾಪ್ಟ್ ಟು ಎನಿ ಎನ್ವಿರಾನ್ಮೆಂಟ್. ಏನು ಕಾರಣ ಅಂದರೆ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ದ ಆಫ್ಸ್ಪ್ರಿಂಗ್ ವಿಲ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಜೆನೆಟಿಕ್ ಕಂಟೆಂಟ್ ದೆನ್ ದಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಪೇರೆಂಟ್. ಸೊ ದೇ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಅಡ್ಯಾಪ್ಟ್ ಟು ಎನಿ ಎನ್ವಿರಾನ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದೇ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಎವಾಲ್ವ್. Okay, so now we have just studied what is a reproduction, different types of the reproduction here. I will just summarize whatever I have told regarding asexual and sexual reproduction. In the asexual reproduction, the offsprings are produced without the involvement of the gametes, whereas in the sexual reproduction, the offsprings are produced with the involvement of the gamete. Process bandaga, In the asexual reproduction, it is always simple and very rapid process. ಬೇಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಇದು. But in sexual reproduction, it is complex and very slow process. ಮೂರನೇದು, in the asexual reproduction ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ it involves the mitotic cell division, whereas in the sexual reproduction it involves the meiotic cell division during gamete formation and mitotic cell division during embryo development. ಮೂರನೇದು, the offspring produced in the asexual reproduction, they resemble parents morphologically and genetically, hence they are called the clones. Whereas in the sexual reproduction, offspring produced do not resemble the parents either morphologically or genetically. Number 3, there is number 4. In the asexual reproduction, there is no genetic recombination, hence the offspring do not evolve. Evolve ಆಗಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ they show low degree of adaptability to the changing environment. If you look in the sexual reproduction, there is genetic recombination in the offspring, hence the offspring they evolve ಆದರೆ they show high degree of adaptability. Okay, now we will study about the next topics. ಯಾವುದಪ್ಪ ಅಂದರೆ asexual reproductions ಅಲ್ಲಿ different types. We'll study about the types of the asexual reproduction. We have around different types of the asexual reproduction, but as per your syllabus, we have fission, we have budding, we have sporulation, we have fragmentation, vegetative propagation, regeneration, and parthenogenesis. ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೇನೆ, asexual reproductions ಅಲ್ಲಿ we are having around 7 different types of the asexual reproduction. Number 1, fission. Number 2, budding. Number 3, sporulation. Number 4, fragmentation. Number 5, vegetative propagation. Number 6, regeneration. Number 7, parthenogenesis. Okay, now we'll study each type of the asexual reproduction in detail. The first type is called the fission. So fission ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು, ಅದು ಎಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ. Fission is always a simple method. ಎಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ they are found in the organisms like bacteria, amoeba, plasmodium, some of the algae, etc. ಸೊ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂದರೆ the parent body they just divide into equal sized daughter cell. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಒಂದು ಅಮೀಬಾ ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ ಅದು 2 ಭಾಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಅಥವಾ 3 ಭಾಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಅಥವಾ 4 ಭಾಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. This is what we call fission. So fission means the parent body they divide into equal sized daughter cells. If they produced 2 equal sized daughter cell, it is called binary fission ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. And if they produce multiple equal sized daughter cells, they are called multiple fission ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಬೈನರಿ ಫಿಷನ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ? ಬೈನರಿ ಫಿಷನ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ it takes place in the bacteria, it takes place in the amoeba. Example. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಮಲ್ಟಿಪಲ್ ಫಿಷನ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ? ಮಲ್ಟಿಪಲ್ ಫಿಷನ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ it takes place in the plasmodium. So what is a plasmodium? Plasmodium means it is a disease causing agent. It causes malaria. This plasmodium that are found in the body of the infected human, as well as they are also found in the female Anopheles mosquitoes. Okay, I'll just summarize the fission here. Fission is a simple method found in the unicellular organisms like bacteria, amoeba, and plasmodium. So here the parent body they divide into equal sized daughter cells. If they divide into 2 equal sized daughter cells, it is called a binary fission. ಇದೆಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ it takes place in amoeba, it also takes place in the bacteria. If they produce multiple equal sized daughter cell, it is called multiple fission ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. It takes place in the plasmodium. Next, we will study the next type of the asexual reproduction called the budding. ಸೊ ಬಡ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು, ಎಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಇದು? ಬಡ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ ಔಟ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್. ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ? ಪೇರೆಂಟ್ ಬಾಡಿ ಮೇಲಿಂದ ಅಥವಾ ಪೇರೆಂಟ್ ಬಾಡಿ ಒಳಗಡೆಯಿಂದ ಒಂದು ಸಣ್ಣ ಔಟ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ the process of outgrowth from the parent body is called budding. Budding can be of two different types here based upon the location. External budding, internal budding ಅಂತ. ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟರ್ನಲ್ ಬಡ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟರ್ನಲ್ ಔಟ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಅಂತ, ಬಾಡಿ ಸರ್ಫೇಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಔಟ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟರ್ನಲ್ ಬಡ್ಡಿಂಗ್. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೆಸ್ಟ್ ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೈಡ್ರಾ. Okay, so in this slide you can find the parent body of the hydra, and on the parent body you can find a small and as well as a very big and outgrowth. Okay, ಎರಡನೇದು ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಬಡ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಅಂತ. ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಬಡ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ ಓಕೆ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೆಸ್ಟ್ ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಜಮ್ಯೂಲ್ಸ್ ಫೌಂಡ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಸ್ಪಾಂಜ್ ಬಾಡಿ. ಸೊ ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಬಡ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅ ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ outgrowth which takes place inside the body of the parent body. Example, the gemmules, they are the internal buds found inside the body of the freshwater sponge. So now I will just summarize the budding here. Budding means it is a process of outgrowth from the parent body. You can find the two types of the budding here. External budding, where you can find a small outgrowth from the surface of the body. Example, hydra, as well as example the potato also. ಎರಡನೇದು ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಬಡ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸಿಂಗ್ ದ ಬಡ್ ಇನ್ಸೈಡ್ ದಿ ಬಾಡಿ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಬಡ್ಡಿಂಗ್. ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ದ ಜಮ್ಯೂಲ್ಸ್ ಫೌಂಡ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಫ್ರೆಶ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಸ್ಪಾಂಜ್. Okay, so now study about the next type called sporulation. ಸೊ ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು? ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಅಂದರೆ ದ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಎಪ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್ ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಸ್. ಸ್ಪೋರ್ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅದು. ಇಟ್ ಟೇಕ್ಸ್ ಪ್ಲೇಸ್ ಇನ್ಸೈಡ್ ಎ ಸ್ಯಾಕ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಸ್ಪೊರಾಂಜಿಯಾ. ಸ್ಪೊರಾಂಜಿಯಾ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ದೀಸ್ ಎಪ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್ ಸ್ಪೋರ್ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ? ಥ್ರೂ ಎ ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ದ ಮಿಯಾಟಿಕ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್. ಸೊ ಸ್ಪಾರ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಎಪ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್ ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಸ್. ಎಪ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್ ಸ್ಪೋರ್ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ? ಇನ್ ಎ ಸ್ಯಾಕ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಸ್ಪೊರಾಂಜಿಯಾ. ಸೊ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಥ್ರೂ ದ ಮಿಯಾಟಿಕ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಡಿವಿಷನ್. ಸೊ ಹೌ ಡು ಯು ಡಿಫೈನ್ ಸ್ಪಾರ್ಯುಲೇಷನ್? Sporulation means the process of formation of the haploid spores in a sac-like structure called sporangia through a meiotic cell division. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ when are these spores produced? When does the sporulation takes place? ಯಾವಾಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಡ್ಯೂರಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ಫೇವರಬಲ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ಸ್. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಟೆಂಪ್ರೇಚರ್ ತುಂಬ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಅಥವಾ ತುಂಬ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಓಕೆ the plant body is going to produce the spores. So with the return of the favorable condition, ಮತ್ತೆ condition normalize ಆದಾಗ these spores they germinate and they produce the new living organisms. Okay, so there are the three types of the spores formation: zoospore, conidiospore, basidiospores ಅಂತ. zoospores ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು? zoospores ಅಂದರೆ these are the motile spores. Motile spores will always have the flagella and they produced in the produced in the aquatic algae. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ the chlamydomonas. So whatever you are seeing at the top right of the video, it is a chlamydomonas. It is a zoospore. Okay, zoospores are the motile spores. They produced in the aquatic algae called the chlamydomonas. ಎರಡನೇದು conidiospores ಅಂತ. These conidiospores, these are non-motile spores. They produced at the tip of the hyphae called conidiophore. Example, the penicillin and aspergillus. ಮೂರನೇದು basidiospores ಅಂತ. The basidiospores are found in the mushroom. ಎಲ್ಲಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅದು? They are found in the mushroom here. Okay, so sporulation ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು? The process of formation of the haploid spores in a sac-like structure called sporangia through meiotic cell division is called the sporangia, is called the sporulations. We find three types of the spores here: zoospores, conidiospores, and basidiospores. The next, we'll study about the next type called the fragmentation. Fragmentation ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು? Fragmentation ಅಂದರೆ it is a process by which the body part divide into small fragment, and each fragment they develop into a new organism. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ we have an example like spirogyra. We have an example called the flatworm ಅಲ್ಲಿ the planaria ಇದೆ. We have an example called the starfish. If you take any of the example, either spirogyra or planaria, or if you take the example of the starfish ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ ಬಾಡಿ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಫ್ರಾಗ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಡಿವೈಡ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಡಿವೈಡ್ ಆಗಿ ಈಚ್ ಫ್ರಾಗ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ದೇ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಇಂಟು ಎ ನ್ಯೂ ಆರ್ಗನಿಸಮ್ಸ್. I will give a simple example here. See, if you take the starfish here, starfish is having 5 arms. If one of the arm cut and it become a small fragment, that small fragment of the arm will develop into a new starfish. This is what we call fragmentations. Okay. Okay, next type is called the vegetative propagation. See, in the vegetative propagation, you should know what is the vegetative part and the sexual part in the plant body. Vegetative part means the example is the root, stem, leaf and the branches. Sexual part bandaga, it is just a flower and its parts. So any non-sexual part of the plant body is called vegetative part of the plant body. ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, non-sexual part of the plant is called the vegetative part of the plant body, and sexual part of the plant is called the sexual organs of the body. So if the non-sexual part of the plant body takes place in the reproduction, it is called vegetative propagation anta ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. And the part of the non-sexual part of the plant body that takes place in the reproduction can be referred by a term called vegetative propagules. There are a multiple example for the vegetative propagules. So in this video there is one table. Okay, the first example is the runner oxalis. Oxalis is a plant. The non-sexual part that takes place in the reproduction is a runner here. In ginger and banana, okay, the non-sexual part that takes place in the reproduction is rhizome. Potato ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ, potato ಅಲ್ಲಿ we have the eyes on the tube that takes part in the asexual reproduction. Next, agave plant ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ they have the bulbils, they meant for the reproduction. Water hyacinth ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ we have the offset, which is the subaerial part of the plant body that takes place in the reproduction. Onion and garlic ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ, which we call them as the bulbs that takes place in the reproduction. Bryophyllum ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ they have the leaf bud that takes place in the reproduction. Mint ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ they have suckers that are meant for the reproduction. Now I will explain some of the mechanism, ಹಿಂಗಾಗುತ್ತೆ, some of the process ಹಿಂಗಾಗುತ್ತೆ regarding the vegetative propagations. See, if you look here, ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ we have just given a statement like water hyacinth ಅಂತ. Water hyacinth ಅಂದರೆ ಐಕಾರ್ನಿಯಾ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಅಂತ, which we commonly call them as terror of Bengal. So in the water hyacinth, the subaerial part of the plant body is called offset ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. This offset ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ they divide continuously, vigorously, and they spread all over the surface of the body of the aquatic body. So ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ the subaerial part of the eichhornia plant, which we call them offset, they divide and they multiply vigorously and spread all over the surface of the aquatic body. ಫುಲ್ ಕವರ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ ಅಕ್ವಾಟಿಕ್ ಬಾಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಕವರ್ ಆದಾಗ ಏನೇನು ಇದರಿಂದ ಪರಿಣಾಮ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ವಾಟ್ ದ ಡ್ರಾಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದಿಸ್? ದೇ ಡ್ರೈನ್ ದಿ ಆಕ್ಸಿಜನ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದೇ ಲೀಡ್ ಟು ದ ಡೆತ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಅಕ್ವಾಟಿಕ್ ಅನಿಮಲ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಅದರ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್. ಸೊ ದೇ ರೆಫರ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಟೆರರ್ ಆಫ್ ಬೆಂಗಾಲ್. ಸೊ ವಾಟರ್ ಹಯಾಸಿಂತ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಟೆರರ್ ಆಫ್ ಬೆಂಗಾಲ್. ಕೇಳ್ಬೋದು ಎಕ್ಸಾಮಿನೇಷನಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ the subaerial part of the plant body called the offset, it divides vigorously and the spread all over the surface of the aquatic body. This leads to draining of the oxygen in water leading to death of the aquatic animals and plants, other plants in the aquatic habitat. We'll study the another simple example here. The other example is the leaf bud of the bryophyllum plant anta. ಈ leaf ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ at the margin of the leaf they have some small, very small leaf bud. When this leaf bud comes in contact with soil, they develop roots and there becomes a new individual plant. This is an example for the vegetative propagation. Okay, next type, it is a regeneration here. So regeneration andre regeneration means it is a process by which an organism grows the lost part of the body is called regeneration. ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, ರೀಜನರೇಷನ್ ಅಂದರೆ ರೀಗ್ರೋತ್ ಆಗೋದು ಅಂತ ಅರ್ಥ. ಯಾವ್ದು ರೀಗ್ರೋತ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಬಾಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಓಕೆ ಬೈ ಆಕ್ಸಿಡೆಂಟ್ ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗಿದರೆ ದಟ್ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್. ಸೊ ಇಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ವಿ ಕಾಲ್ regeneration. And this regeneration is very common in planaria and some of the starfishes. Okay, next we'll study about the last type. It is called parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis are noticed among the animals. Example, the insects. In the insect example is the house example, the honeybee. So parthenogenesis andre ಏನು? Parthenogenesis ಅಂದರೆ the process of development of an organism from unfertilized eggs. The process of formation of the organism from the unfertilized eggs is called the parthenogenesis. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಹನಿಬಿ ಅಂತ. ಒಂದು ಹೆಗ್ಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಹೆಗ್ಗೇನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ವಿತೌಟ್ ಫರ್ಟಿಲೈಸೇಷನ್ ದೇ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಇಂಟು ಎ ನ್ಯೂ ಲಿವಿಂಗ್ organism. This is what we call parthenogenesis. It takes place very commonly in the honeybees. I am not going in depth here. Okay, parthenogenesis andre ಏನು? The process of development of an organism from an unfertilized egg is called parthenogenesis and it takes place in the honeybee. Okay, the next I will just summarize the types of the asexual reproduction which we have studied. So we studied about what is the fission, example, budding, types of the budding, sporulation, types of the spores, fragmentation, example, vegetative propagation, types and with some examples, regeneration and parthenogenesis with some examples. Okay, now we'll study about the next concept about sexual reproduction. ನಾವು ಆವಾಗಲೇ ಓದಿದ್ವಿ. So I just told you about what is sexual reproduction as well as asexual reproduction initially. Okay, I will again tell you about the sexual reproduction here. So sexual reproduction means here the offsprings are produced without the involvement of the gametes from the parents. If you look the characteristic features, it is a complex process and a very slow process. Most slow ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. It involves meiotic cell division during gamete formation and mitotic division during development of the zygote. The offspring produced will have genetic mixing up. This is what we call the genetic recombination. So this brings the variation in characters and thus the evolution is set up. Genetic recombination ಆದಾಗ evolution setup ಆದಾಗ okay, the organism is subjected to higher degree of adaptability to the changing environment. ಅದು ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋದ ಸಹ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಅದು ಅಡಾಪ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು the offspring which are produced through the sexual reproduction. Okay, now we'll study the next concept. It is called the phases of life cycle. ಈ ಫೇಸಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಸೈಕಲ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಒಟ್ಟು 3 ಭಾಗ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಒಟ್ಟು 3 ಫೇಸಸ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಜುವಿನೈಲ್ ಫೇಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಯೂಸ್ ಅದರ್ ಟರ್ಮ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ವೆಜಿಟೇಟಿವ್ ಫೇಸ್. ಎರಡನೇದು ರೀಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಫೇಸ್. ನಂಬರ್ 3 ಸೆನೆಸೆಂಟ್ ಫೇಸ್ ಅಂತ. Okay, the phases of life cycle involves 3 phases. Number 1 juvenile phase, vegetative phase. Number 2 reproductive phase. Number 3 senescent phase. Okay, so now we will study about what is a juvenile phase or a vegetative phase. The juvenile phase is a phase that is applied for the animals. Vegetative phase is a term applied for the plants. ಸೊ ಜುವಿನೈಲ್ ಫೇಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ವೆಜಿಟೇಟಿವ್ ಫೇಸಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ದರ್ ಇಸ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಸೊಮ್ಯಾಟಿಕ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಅಥವಾ ವೆಜಿಟೇಟಿವ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಆಫ್ ಇನ್ ದಿ ಆರ್ಗನಿಸಮ್. When the organism, they remain sexually immature and they remain inactive in terms of reproduction. ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, juvenile phase is applicable for the animals, vegetative phase is applicable only for the plants here. Okay, in this phase the somatic part of the animal or the vegetative part of the animal, okay, they keep on growing, but sexually and in terms of reproduction they remains immature and inactive. ಎರಡನೇ phase, it is called reproductive phase ಅಂತ. In this phase the somatic growth ಅಥವಾ vegetative growth slows down, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, but the organism, they start to attain sexual maturity and they remain reproductively active. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲೇನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಸೊಮ್ಯಾಟಿಕ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಅಥವಾ ವೆಜಿಟೇಟಿವ್ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಸ್ಲೋ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದರ್ ಈಸ್ more growth of the sexual organ, the sexual part of the plant, the sexual part of the animal. Similarly, there is formation of the gametes. ಇದೆಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಇದು in the reproductive phase. So how do we know whether a plant or animal has matured sexually and they are active in terms of reproduction? ಹಿಂಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಇದು. If you look in the plant, the flowering process begins. This is how we say the plant is mature sexually. What about in the animals? In the animals, the gonad, they start to mature and they start to produce the gametes. So when we say, this is how we say the animal is matured sexually. Fine. The last phase is senescent phase ಅಂತ. Senescent phase is the end of the reproductive phase. During this phase there is a slow down of the metabolic process. ಮೆಟಬಾಲಿಸಮ್ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಸ್ಲೋ ಆಗೋಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರುವಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ. ಎರಡನೇದು, ದ ಟಿಶ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದಿ ಆರ್ಗನ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ದಿ ಬಾಡಿ ದೇ ಬಿಗಿನ್ಸ್ ಟು ಡೈ. ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ technically we can also use a term called deterioration of tissues and organs. Deterioration of tissues and organs ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು, ಟಿಶ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮತ್ತು ಆರ್ಗನ್ಸ್ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ದೇ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಟು ಡೈ. ಒನ್ಸ್ ದೀಸ್ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ಬಿಗಿನ್ಸ್, ಮೆಟಬಾಲಿಕ್ ರೇಟ್ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಆದಾಗ, ಟಿಶ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆರ್ಗನ್ಸ್ ಡೆತ್ ಆದಾಗ, ಅಲ್ಟಿಮೇಟ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ ಲೀಡ್ಸ್ ಟು ಡೆತ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಆರ್ಗನಿಸಮ್ಸ್. Okay, so if you just look back in the phases of life cycle, we come across the juvenile phase, reproductive phase and senescent phase. In my next upcoming class, I will teach the second phase in the life cycle. ಯಾವ್ದಪ್ಪ ಫೇಸ್ ಅಪ್ಪ ಅಂದರೆ, which I just told about the reproductive phase. I will go in depth here. Okay, in my coming class I will deal with the reproductive phase of the phases of the life cycles.